Welcome to One-on-One with Expert Flyer. This is your host, Lisa Caslin, and we're continuing our summer air travel series, and we're covering safety today and the intersection of air travel and COVID this summer. And we're bringing back a guest that we've had on before, William J. McGee. He is an aviation advisor to Consumer Reports, and he's also the author of a best-selling airline industry expose called Attention All Passengers. Good to have you back, Bill.
Always a pleasure, Lisa. Thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot to talk about, I know. So let's just hit it. People are dying to travel again. I know, there's a lot of pent-up demand out there, but, there's also an equal amount of trepidation and confusion, I think, as it relates to, the policies and protocols and what's being enforced on the airlines today. So I wanted just to kind of get a little bit of a level set from you on what's going on. Maybe, just starting out with a simple question like, how do the airlines measure safety when it comes to the spread of infectious diseases? How do they do that?
Well, that's an excellent question. And the answer is that, currently in the United States, we have about 10 scheduled jet airlines, and there's 10 different answers to that question. And that, in fact, is the heart of the problem. If you go back to 9/11, under President Bush, the DOT secretary took immediate action and emergency action within days of 9/11. I was the editor of Consumer Reports Travel Letter at the time, and I recall all this. And I went back and looked at the details because some of it got a little fuzzy. But the fact is, within just a few days of 9/11, an order went out to put up cockpit barriers so that, it's a bar anyone that doesn't belong getting into the cockpit. And within days, a committee had been formed of experts in the field, and within weeks, new procedures and policies were implemented. And that did a lot, obviously, to, allay concerns for the public and to get people flying again, which is what the industry says it wants. Now, we could have a separate discussion about the TSA and the things that, could be criticized there. But the bottom line is, the government took action, and there was one set of rules nationwide for all airports and all airlines. And what we have now is this vacuum. And at Consumer Reports, we've been highly critical of Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao because here it is months since, the lockdown started, and we all realized how serious this pandemic was. And she has taken no action in terms of making anything mandatory. Finally, 2 weeks ago, she put out a 44-page report, and it's full of recommendations for airlines and airports.
That's right.
So what we have right now is sort of the Wild West. Everybody is doing what they want. And each airline has its own policies, and it has the authority to change those policies day to day. From a consumer perspective, not only are there, obvious health concerns, but it could not be more confusing. It's absolutely impossible to try and plan a trip right now and know what policies and procedures will be in place, for health issues. Because, as I say, the airlines and airports are each doing their own thing. Even some states are doing their own thing. Hawaii has a quarantine. New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut have a quarantine. Colorado took some other measures.
Yeah, Texas. I was reading that.
Yeah, it's just incredible, And then when you layer on that, when you look at, for the most part, the major carriers in this country, except Southwest, they have hub and spoke systems, right? So their whole model is built on sending you to, an intermediary airport and then connecting, and you go on to where you're going. Well, many of those hub airports are in the Sun Belt. They're in southern states, and that was done intentionally because then in the winter you have better on-time performance, right? So you'd rather be connecting to Phoenix than Chicago if there's a blizzard, right? Yeah. Well, that's coming back to bite the airlines a little bit right now because most of the hubs, you go across the belt there, Atlanta, Miami, Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, those are in states that have the highest, spikes right now. Florida, Georgia, Texas. So there's a lot of questions and a lot of problems. And for us, and I'd love to discuss, at length what airlines are doing, but for us, this all stems from the DOT and Secretary Elaine Chao's lack of any kind of meaningful, mandates. Everything is optional in her view.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the CDC has been abundantly clear that, face masks and distancing are, one of the top priorities in terms of,
right.
People congregating indoors. I mean, it is kind of surprising that several airlines, including, American Airlines, United, Spirit, a couple of others, have resumed selling middle seats on flights. And I'm just wondering how that is justifiable at this point.
Well, it's an excellent question, Lisa. It really is, because in our view, it's not justifiable. I mean, if you sort of look at this in terms of what needs to be done, I think you can sort of come up with a couple of quick bullet points. And each one of those bullet points is problematic, and each one has a lot of questions about it. And that's why, we have been very clear at Consumer Reports. I am not holding myself out by any means as an expert on, pandemics. None of us are. What we're saying is, just as after 9/11, all the experts were put in a room and said, come up with something. That's what we're saying needs to be done now. So, the engineers from the aircraft, the people from the airports and the airlines and the labor unions, everybody, the medical professionals, all of them have to be put in a room and said, given a mandate to say, okay, what are the best policies, and then how do we implement them? And No,
I've read several stories. The airlines are sort of begging for this. They want the government to step in and make some mandates here. So, I mean, knowing that consumer confidence would definitely be buoyed if that was the case. I'm just wondering if the airlines are in agreement, why the government would not be stepping up.
Well, I think, what you're saying is true, but to an extent. The airlines, some airlines would like to see this. Some have been more vocal than others. For us, there's a sort of bitter irony here. As the aviation advisor for Consumer Reports, I think a lot of people only think of Consumer Reports as a publishing entity in our magazine, but we're the largest nonprofit consumer organization in the world. And my role is on the advocacy side, not on the journalism side. I do write for Consumer Reports at times, but primarily I'm an advocate. And so I'll be honest with you. I mean, for 10 years now, I've been in Washington knocking heads, in Congress and at the DOT and with the airlines, trying to, fight for measures for consumers, whether they're, helping you financially or safety or health or what have you. And the airlines come back at every turn, and particularly the airlines' major trade organization, their lobbying group, Airlines for America, and they have never seen a regulation that they wouldn't want to kill. I mean, this is just every time they say, no. Well, now they're getting what they wished for, okay? So like I say, there's a bitter irony here. The airlines have been fighting for years to basically do away with practically every regulation that has come down the pike. And now they're getting it. Now they have a Secretary of Transportation who is saying, hey, you know what? It's all up to you. Do what you want. And that, in effect, is what is happening. And so, like I say, it's a bitter irony. But the fact is, I think they're coming to the conclusion, let's put aside the humanitarian aspects of this. Let's put aside, because, this couldn't be more serious. It's not hyperbole to say this is a life and death issue. It is a life and death issue. These decisions have effects on, some people living or dying. So, let alone all the people that are suffering through, the health issues with COVID. And I think we all know some by now. I certainly do. But putting that aside, putting the humanitarian issues aside, if you want to look at this very coldly from a dollars and cents standpoint only, well, it's bad business. It just doesn't make sense, because the bottom line is, until consumers are confident that it's, safe to fly, and that the airlines and airports and everyone is doing what, everything they need to do, they're not going to fly, not in the numbers the airlines want to see. And so again, that's why I started this conversation by bringing up 9/11. After 9/11, people were frightened, beyond belief to fly again, as we, those of us who lived through it, we remember that.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is, that to us, that's not to turn this into an overtly political discussion, but to us, that's what government is for, is to function at times like this. If not, why have a government? So the government stepped in and said, we're not going to allow Delta to do one thing and United another, and we're not going to allow Chicago O'Hare Airport to do it this way and LAX to do it this way. The government stepped in and said, there's one set of rules. And guess what? Over time it works. Now, of course, fewer people traveled in the months after 9/11, but slowly and gradually it came back, and, it came back stronger than ever. Here, I don't know any analyst who can say with any confidence, well, this is when, people are going to start flying again. You just can't do it. And
no.
I hear every day from people, if you go on Consumer Reports' Twitter and Facebook pages, we see comments literally every day. I look at it every day, and people are saying, I'm not going to be flying anytime soon. I have no desire to fly, And with the DOT not doing a thing, and airlines all over the map on these issues, it's doing nothing for consumer confidence. So your point is a good one. I'm sure there are an awful lot of airline executives in this country who are now saying, gee, maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea if the DOT did something.
Yeah. Well, how about, I know you're not, a technology expert per se, but I know that you do know a lot about the filtration system, the ventilation, the HEPA filters, and all of that. Has there been sort of conclusive evidence that they are as safe as they say? They're saying that the HEPA filters that are used on aircraft are basically, creating an environment that's almost hospital-like in effect to the quality of the air. Is that true? Right.
That's the term you hear all the time, that they're as good as in operating rooms, And I want to be as fair as possible, and I think the answer is mixed, So I think a lot of the answers I'm going to be giving you today are mixed because, we're talking about a lot of different airlines and a lot of different aircraft. Okay, so it's hard to say, one size fits all on these issues.
Sure.
The bottom line is, the HEPA filters. I wrote an article about this just recently, so I did a lot of research on it and talked to some experts in the field. The HEPA filters are that good; they're great, but a couple of caveats. One is, although every airline in the United States has aircraft with HEPA filters, not every aircraft operating on behalf of those airlines has them. So there are some exceptions, okay? So that's number one. So you have to be careful because some of these statements that are putting out, like when organizations say, well, every airline in the United States has HEPA filters. That doesn't mean every airplane in their fleet has a HEPA filter, okay? But there are other issues, and that is that, in order for any sort of germs to get to be eradicated, they have to get to that filter. And so the experts I spoke to said, you could have 10 HEPA filters, built into the bulkhead of the cabin, but the fact is, if someone next to you sneezes, that's not going to get to the filter before it affects you, right? So we're back to the basics. We're back to masks. We're back to social distancing. The HEPA filter is not going to eradicate those concerns, okay? So is a HEPA filter better than a filter in a grocery store or a drugstore? No question, right? But, for the most part. But we still have these basic issues, the stuff that's not rocket science, masks, staying 6 feet apart. Well, it's a real challenge to stay 6 feet apart in the cabin of an aircraft, right? So I have a feeling you're going to want to talk about that too.
Yeah, it's just, it's kind of like the emperor has no clothes on kind of thing. It's like, okay, what don't we understand here? It is impossible. You can barely get 6 inches between people, never mind 6 feet on an aircraft. So it's, I really am. I just read an article yesterday about these hazmat suits this startup company is selling, and they've already sold 50,000 of these things at $250 a pop. So I guess we're going to be seeing people, dressed in these crazy costumes to protect themselves in the future. Who knows? But I mean, do you think that there's going to be a break at some point? I mean, what do you think that the future looks like? I mean, over the next 3 months, 6 months? I mean, something has to change. What's it going to be?
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, as with a lot of other issues in America, it's going to be driven by money. And I think the airlines are going to reach this point where irony of ironies, for, like I say, for consumer advocates like myself who have knocked heads with them for years and years, I think they're the ones going to be going to the DOT and saying, you need to do something. I really do believe that.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. Is there anything else that you think we should know, that you think, travelers should be aware of that we haven't covered?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so we've talked about the fact that airlines have, different policies from airline to airline.
Yeah.
And again, this is a problem because if the DOT puts in a regulation, then that's it. And there's no saying, well, this airline is following it and this one isn't. It's the law, period. Think about when you get on an airplane and a flight attendant is doing a safety briefing and says, federal regulations prohibit you from tampering with the smoke alarm in the lavatory, right? It's like, that's it. It's not up for discussion. You do not have the ability to do that. Now you have flight attendants saying, well, we'd like you to put on a mask. Well, no, So what happens if the guy's sitting across the aisle from you says, no, it's my right not to put on a mask? It's a mess right now. It's a mess. So, some airlines are saying you should put on masks. Some are being more vigilant than others about enforcing it. Some are not even saying it. Some are saying we're going to keep middle seats empty. Others are not. There's so many different issues here. How do you address, the 6-foot rule when someone is walking down, the aisle of the cabin to go to the lavatory and you're on an aisle seat, right? I mean, they're going to be brushing up against your shoulder, as always happens. There's no 6 feet there. There's so many questions. I mean, in terms of practical advice, if I was flying tomorrow or if, someone I cared about was flying tomorrow, it sounds kind of funny to say, but I remember when my son was young, we always traveled with a diaper bag, right? And I always had my diaper bag for him. Well, I think we're going to have adult diaper bags now. I think everybody's going to have their little kit. And in there is going to be your wipes, and it's going to be your sanitizer, and it's going to be a couple of extra masks. And, we're all going to be scrubbing down the area where we sit. I would not personally take the airline's, assurance that they are increasing the cleaning of the aircraft. I know they are, but the question is, are they doing it between every flight? On the overnight, in many cases, it's happening. Is it happening? Is a deep cleaning being done, throughout the day? So if you've been on a flight at 9 o'clock at night and that plane has been used 6 or 7 times today, and 6 or 7 different people have sat in your seat, I'll tell you what, it's a good idea to get out some wipes and some sanitizer and the tray table and the armrests and the window shade and all the rest of it.
Have you flown? Have you flown in the past couple?
Ironically, the last time I flew was in March when I went to Washington to testify before Congress on airline issues, and it was just on the horizon then. But I think I'm going to be flying this later this month, and so I have concerns just like everyone else. And so I'll make sure I wear a mask. I'll make sure I do, social distancing as best I can. But these problems are not easy. And the airlines are not helping themselves when they start, implementing policies and then changing policies. And, what people have to understand is that when you buy a ticket, you're governed by something called the contract of carriage, the airline's contract. And it's a one-sided contract, right? You don't get to say, well, I'm going to, change this rule. No, it doesn't work that way. You either take it or you leave it. And so, airlines are changing those contracts every day. They're saying, we're going to do this, and the next week they could say, no, we're going to do something else. So the need for the DOT to step in is just so urgent, I don't think it can be understated.
Well, listen, we thank you for all of your insight, and please keep us posted. As you conquer this beast and come up with some solutions. Hopefully, we will hear good news in the coming months.
Yeah, I hope so too, Lisa. I really do. I'd love to come back and talk to you again, and maybe the way things are moving so quickly, as soon as a month from now, there could be important changes in place. But as for right now, I look at this industry and I just see a ton of question marks, and I don't think the airlines have done a good job at all at trying to really do everything in their power. Some are doing a better job than others, there's no question. But they're really not addressing the consumer, concerns and fears, and they need to step up. And even better would be for the DOT to step up. Yeah,
they're waiting for somebody else to take the lead.
I agree with you. I think that seems to be the sense because, this is just, you look right now and you see all the selfies that are being taken and put on social media of people on crowded flights with all the middle seats taken. And that just erodes any kind of confidence in the system. People see that and say, well, there's no way. How is it that I'm standing 6 feet apart to get into my grocery store in the parking lot, but I'm supposed to get in a plane and have somebody sit, elbow to elbow with me? I mean, how is that working?
For 3 or 4 hours. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. Great to talk to you again, and we'll have you back soon.
Great. I'm looking forward to it, Lisa. Always a pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.